Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. And I am so grateful to have my guest on today with me. He is a trainer, a speaker. This guy wears so many hats. I'm telling you, this guy wears a lot of hats. And I am so grateful to have him on today with me. He is Mike Hernandez. Full disclosure, Mike lives down as far south as you can get in the United States. So I am grateful through the power of the interwebs here from West Virginia to Texas. My guest, Mike Hernandez, joins me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Mike, how are you today, man?
I'm doing great, Brian. Thanks for having me. Good morning. It's a connection that doesn't seem to go away. It's in my life, West Virginia to Texas. So
yeah, you and I were
great.
talking. Yeah, you and I were talking before. You've rolled through this beautiful state that I live in, and you know, it's kind of near and dear to your heart. You know, tell me about, you know, I know the story, but remind folks again what connection you have to West Virginia.
Well, Brian, my grandparents on my mother's side were, from West Virginia. They lived in Logan.
Yep.
My parents met somehow and got married. But at some point there was a divorce, and we went to live with my mother in Logan, West Virginia. So I attended my first school, there in Logan, went trick-or-treating. I think I might have mentioned that before. And
Yep.
It was snowing. But I think it just wasn't meant to be. My mom had other things going on, I guess. And I'm just going to drop this here. She abandoned us one night, and it was a snowstorm, power outage. We were kids. I wasn't even 5 years old. And, we went looking for her, walking through the streets of Logan.
Yep.
And it was crazy, in the snowstorm, like, where's our mom? But at any rate.
And in full disclosure, Logan, West Virginia is about an hour from where I live. And the easiest way is to back road from where I live to back road down West Virginia Route 10. And it's a windy, curvy road. But Logan at one time was the capital of West Virginia for coal and coal production. And a lot of coal was produced in the Logan, and Williamson's about 25, 30 miles south of Logan. But, Mike, when you were there, that was right in the boom of the coal industry and things like that. So
yeah.
I can't imagine. Listen, Logan's a little bit of a rough town right now because of different things that have happened with drugs and things like that. Things have invaded it. But Logan is it's a beautiful little town. It sits on a river. And
yes.
You mentioned your grandparents being there and things like that. You talk about your mom taking off, and let's just go there for a couple of minutes because I think that's fascinating. You were how old when your mom decided to take off?
4 or 5, maybe. I don't think I was even in school yet.
So you were walking around just kind of looking for your mom in Logan, West Virginia.
Yep. Crossing over the bridge, that little river creek that runs through there. My grandparents lived on top of a mountain, I guess. My grandfather was a coal miner, actually. My uncle Charles was a coal miner as well. So, yeah, you're exactly right. And now I did get back to West Virginia, Logan, maybe around 2014 when I was up in the Bristol, Tennessee area.
Yep, not far.
And to your point, it's kind of everything you described. But, some changes, and it was just good for the soul to get back. As I think I mentioned, sometimes you just have questions that haunt you your whole life, that you ask yourself.
When you made that trip, Mike, did you feel a sense of reconnection? Was it that trip for you? Was it reconnecting to a part of your family and a part of your past? Because I think sometimes when people, and I would almost call them pilgrimages, because, and to give you an example, I lived in a little town in Southeast Ohio. My wife and I did for a few years. And both of my grandparents on my dad's side were buried in a cemetery in that same little town. And it wasn't until I lived over there that I actually visited their graves.
Right. And
so for me, it was cathartic because I was like, wow, and my dad never really talked about it because he was like, well, that's where their bodies are laid. And because he was a Christian and I was a Christian, we just said, okay, grandma and grandpa are with the Lord, their bodies.
Right.
And so there wasn't any desire or need or anything like that growing up to visit the cemetery. But once I got older, I'm like, I'm going to go visit the gravesite.
Yeah.
I'm going to go do that and make that pilgrimage, if you will.
Yes.
When you went back to Logan, what kind of memories stirred in your mind about the time you were there? When you drove back in to Logan, was there a lot of things that came flooding back to you?
Of course there were. And, the first memory that comes back to me is crossing that little bridge, crossing that little river to get to the old school. Now, I was looking for the school and I was looking for the place where I used to live, and it was still there, but it had changed. It became a lot more crowded.
Yeah.
But most definitely, going up the mountain, the mountainside, looking for where my grandparents used to live and seeing, kind of the conditions and things like that. Looking for a Burger King. There was a Burger King there when my dad went to go pick us up after, from the welfare department. They picked us up. We stopped at this Burger King and they had this really cool sale, Brian. You got like a Looney Tunes glass, and each of my brothers and sisters, there was 4 of us all together, we each got one. Well, I was the only one who took care of that. And I took it to my grandmother's house and I would tell her grandma on my dad's side, Grandma, take care of this. So, I mean, I think I probably had that till about 10 years ago when somebody broke into my house when I was gone and they stole my Bugs Bunny glass from 1972. So yeah, a lot of memories.
And probably put it on eBay, Mike. That is just how miscreant and deviant people are, man.
Yes, but
somebody deviant enough to steal a Looney Tunes glass. Go figure, man. Go figure.
You just don't know what the connection somebody has though when you trample over somebody or you kind of trespass against them. I guess you just don't know what. It's just a glass, but that's a lot of history there and a lot of my childhood, I guess, memories.
I want to pivot here for just a minute. Take me to what's going on in South Texas right now, where you're at, because everybody is dealing with this pandemic in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all seeing different things and things like that.
Sure.
What are you seeing down in deep South Texas where you are?
When I talk to people around the world, Brian, that I teach, they ask me the same thing, and I always tell them it's like we were locked down for a month, the month of April, and then everybody's acting like it was just a bad dream, and everybody's out doing whatever it is they do down on South Padre Island. You see the families in these go-karts and buggies and golf carts and stuff. So everybody's kind of just going about doing their own thing. So, not everybody's wearing the mask. And I heard some of your, broadcast this morning. And so it seems like, it's spreading, it's, violently growing,
right.
but I don't know. I don't know for a fact, but I kind of keep to myself anyway, and I focus on my goals and doing stuff like that. So I only get out when I need to.
Well, and I think it's interesting, Mike, and the reason I asked that, I think it's interesting because everybody is dealing with this pandemic in different ways.
Right.
And it's affecting people in different ways. Some people have lost loved ones from it. Some people have been furloughed and laid off and things like that. So that's why I asked the question, because every region of the country, and you hear Dr. Fauci and those people, they'll say, well, it's going to spread and people are going to get vulnerable. And what I said was, unless you know for certain what's going to happen, why not think positively and say, listen, it's a good thing to wear a mask when you're out in public.
Right.
It's, especially if you live with somebody that has vulnerabilities or autoimmune diseases or something like that. It's always good to be cautious.
Correct.
And say that instead of going, oh my gosh, Corona's going to invade the world, and so we just need more, we need more positivity.
Sure.
Mike, you have got a phenomenal story, your time and your resume and things like that. Take me, we touched on it a little bit as we started the podcast. Take me from point A to point B, how you got to where you were. So you moved from Logan, West Virginia,
right,
when you were a kid. Let's pick up your story from there and take us from as deep as you want to go from point A to point B, how you got from here to there.
Well, so my dad picked us up. We came down to Texas, and my dad, was in another relationship with somebody who had 9 kids of her own. So you put us together, there's 13, Brian. They had 2 together.
You were like the Brady Bunch-Duggers. It's a combination of the Brady Bunch and the Duggars,
Yes. Yes. So, 14 brothers and sisters, man, it was tough. My dad was the only one who worked. My mom stayed home, obviously, and took care of everything else. But I think at a young age, man, it's just overwhelming to, not trying to compete for attention, but, sometimes you've got to eat and you've got to strike quick when you can and things like that. But, I was a pretty quiet kid. I was pretty smart, I think. I read a lot, but I kind of acted up in school. And, I've heard some of the story about you and your father and the relationship. My father was, the biggest character in my life, the biggest impact, the most positive guy. He passed away, I think, around the same time, 2013 in November.
Yeah.
So it's been about 7 years. But at any rate, man, what I wouldn't do to be with my dad, and it was just the greatest thing in the world. My best memories as a kid were getting to go to work with my dad.
Yeah.
But I did, I acted up in school. The second most influential person in my life, and maybe, I don't know if she was more impactful in some ways, was a teacher I had, Mrs. Pinkerton. That poor lady. I had her 3 times, Brian. When I was in 3rd grade, she was like brand new teacher's aide.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what it was, but I remember her saying, hey, okay, class, we're going to get a book. Open up your books. And I didn't have my book. And she came to me and she's like, you need to go get a book. And I'm like,
yep.
Why don't you go get it? I don't know what it was.
Yep.
And so, of course, she goes and gets the book and she comes back and she's like, open it up to page, whatever. I'm like, why don't you open it up to page? Anyway, I just feel bad for this lady. And then I had her again in the 7th grade, Brian, and it's torture. But in the 8th grade, something happened that summer in the 8th grade, the 7th grade to 8th grade. My dad used to go to these, a lot of, he'd go to stuff like Toastmasters, and we went to this seminar, and he was enrolled in something called the Laws of Success and Napoleon Hill. And there was a guy named Jerry Epple that kind of did that. And there were all these businessmen, and I'm a kid in this, going from the 7th to 8th grade, not really interested in that stuff, but I did out of respect for my dad. I paid attention, and everybody had to go give speeches, and so did I. And I hear a lot of people these days, Brian, and they say, why don't they teach business in high school? Why don't they teach finance? Why don't they teach all these different things?
Yeah.
And right now I actually do teach business in high school, but I always think to myself, kids don't have the context to really appreciate it, because they don't have to work. Their parents, most of them, parents provide.
Well, Mike, everything is instantaneous. If a kid can't find it here, then it doesn't exist.
Right.
And a lot of people, and again, they see people who get paid to be influencers, and they see people that, are using social media to make money and things like that. And of all the people that are registered users of these social media platforms, there is a minute percentage that are actually monetizing
Yes.
those platforms. But every kid thinks they can do it, and then they watch Shark Tank, and they're like,
Yes.
I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But Mike, I appreciate the fact that you're teaching business in high school. I think it should be required.
Yes.
I think it should be a required class.
I agree. And here's the thing too, Brian. So right off the bat, I realized, because all those things that I didn't really care for, you want to think about girls, your friends, and all those things at that age.
Yep.
When I needed it, it just kicked in. So I tell kids the same thing. Like, I know you guys, I'll ask them, hey, how many of you guys want to, like business? And, I said, it's okay if you don't. And most of them don't. And then I say, how many of you guys like money? Oh, all the hands go up.
Everybody likes
exactly.
money. Yeah.
And so, I tell people, I tell my students, my job is to make you guys aware.
Yep.
Okay, I understand. But this way, when you run into it in the future, you're aware. But I do encourage, and I do bring up, hey, the world is different. When I started working, I was making $2.85 an hour. You guys can be, because of social media, you can. Most of you won't.
Yeah.
But I want you to know it's there. You have that opportunity. You guys can manage social media, do different things. Shark Tank's a favorite again. If nothing else, just to get them inspired, get them thinking, let them know what the possibilities are. Now, if you need my help and you want me to go deeper, then that's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
But it's just a maturity thing, and ever since then, getting back to Mrs. Pinkerton, honest to God, Brian, I spent the rest of my life trying to atone for that. 8th grade was a better year. One of the things I did was I recited the Charge of the Light Brigade. We had a poem to do. Everybody's doing 5 or 10 lines, and I got to make it up to her. So I worked really extra hard. And so everything afterward has been that. So I got into high school, and I know you're a big sports guy. I used to be, but it's something else that's been a very valuable lesson. One day after practice, football practice, the coach says, hey, come see me during track season. Okay. And I'm thinking, okay, so I do. And he says, I'm going to have you go run with the milers. I've never run. I couldn't run. My little brother could outrun me.
Yep.
But next thing I know, Brian, I'm the only one running varsity as a freshman.
Yeah.
So when people see things, you may not see them in yourself, but other people may. And so that's something else I try to tell people. It's not about me, but it's just about somebody saw that.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, you know what? Give this a shot. So I moved into San Antonio when I was, tired. I graduated and big family. You just want to get out of the,
Yep.
And I moved to San Antonio. I just needed a job, Brian. I got in the convenience store by accident.
Mm-hmm.
The lady almost didn't hire me. And I asked her why. And she says, because you're just too ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself,
you're not going to be here long.
Yeah, but I'm thinking to myself, you don't understand who they thought I was supposed to be. And then several years later, I hear Lane Staley singing that. Yep. But my dad had prepped me. I had plans, I had ambitions, I had goals. And so, so I went through that, and I just noticed that there was a lot of turnover, a lot of, I guess, a lack of training. I started and I worked really hard. I picked up a lot of shifts, and I told him from day one, I want to be an assistant manager. It took me over a year. Just because people don't have time or the conditions aren't right or somebody doesn't want to. And then we fast forward to, 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing an MBA. I'm working on an MBA. I'm working 80 hours a week as a district manager. And, the realization came wait a minute, all the problems we had when I was started off back in 1992 are still here, and they all revolve around training.
And nothing got fixed, right? I mean, you were seeing, in a business, a lot of times, the greatest ideas that help a business come from the simplest things not getting done correctly.
Right.
And that you just mentioned what you saw in 1992, you were still seeing in 2016.
Yes.
You would think that, and the convenience store industry has changed immeasurably.
It has.
In 24 years. And I'll say this, and I know that business pretty well. In 1992, you walked into a convenience store and you got pop, chips, candy, gum. You
Hot
got
dogs.
hot dog, maybe not every C-store, at least where I live, not every C-store had hot dogs.
Yeah.
But you could go, and primarily you stopped there to get gas.
Yes.
Primarily you bought gas and snacks.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. Now you walk into a convenience store and they've got hot foods. They've done a great job with meal replacement, either breakfast, lunch, or dinner.
Mm-hmm.
You go there, you still get your snacks, but they've got fresh donuts. A lot of them have fresh donuts. A lot of them are making fresh donuts. I think about, Mike, and I don't want to dive off here.
Oh, go ahead.
One of my favorite convenience stores is outside of Lexington, Kentucky. And it's between Lexington and Frankfort, and it's on a back road. It comes in. And if you're familiar with that area, the castle is nearby. There's a big castle that somebody built 30 years ago. And they have a fresh donut place inside that C-store. It's a BP. It's called Dough Daddy's.
Mm.
Phenomenally good donuts. And one side is the C-store, the traditional C-store. There's gas pumps and things like that. The other side's a full-on bakery. And you get scones and muffins and cinnamon rolls and donuts. And that's what the C-store world has evolved to nowadays is just the things you can buy at a C-store are just phenomenally. Like, in full disclosure, we have Sheetz nearby. I go there and get pretzels. They're 99 cents, and they're awesome. And I love it. And I come back home, and I put them in the oven. In about 10 minutes, I get a hot pretzel. I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. That's how C-stores have evolved.
Yes.
But you saw a need there that didn't go away after 24 years. Mm-hmm. What was that V8 moment for you that you said, I can fix this?
Well, when I was working on that MBA, I was researching. So whatever the assignment was, I would always go into research the convenience store industry. And I would I wouldn't find a whole lot. And so
did you go there just because of familiarity? Was that the reason you did that?
Right. And I know when you completed your MBA, I don't know if you had a lot of those, the light turns on. I almost felt like I had a new set of eyes, maybe a new mind.
I did.
Because I started
managing
seeing things.
Managing salespeople for me was what really helped me in my MBA program. Because I could call on those times. So you're 100% right.
Yeah. So I just started that's what you're exactly right. That's why I went there. I said, well, wait a minute, let me just kind of look at this parallel. And I just saw too much opportunity. And I thought, wow, I was talking to somebody and he had a similar educational experience. And anytime I was studying a certain topic, I'd go ask questions around the little organization that I worked for. And so it got it got the conversation started. They didn't always end the way I wanted them to or hoped they would, but at least the conversation got going. And so some things did transpire from there. But, the guy says, hey, you can create your own stuff and put it out there.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You know what? And I thought, wow, if I can be a district manager to a group of stores, why can't I be a district manager to, anybody else who would want it or need it? And so that's kind of where it started. And then I pursued a master's in teaching and learning with technology because I wanted to do it the right way. I didn't want to just be somebody who shows up. I wanted the credentials, affiliations, all, to go along with that experience. I want to build this the right way. So
well, and Mike, there's something to be said for that because again, you can put some training together and you can say, okay, this is what I see a lot of times. And you're the perfect person to talk through this with. You'll see trainings a lot of times that will overpromise and underdeliver. And people will say, if you take my training course, I'll grow your sales by 25 or 30%. That's a tall order.
Yes.
Because you're assuming that your material is so good that everybody is going to absorb it and then they're going to execute it.
Yes.
And I was having a discussion with a friend of mine in Louisiana, And we were talking about execution. He was a former college football player. And he's been a guest on the podcast, Marsh Spice.
Okay.
And I said, Marsh, the one thing about it is that the quarterback position in sports is the most overcoached position because it's arguably the most important position. The guy can know the playbook inside and out. He can know the cadence, and he might know what play to call.
Yeah.
But when you get defensive linemen and linebackers rushing you,
yes,
it's execution. It's where do you deliver the football? How accurately do you deliver the football? How timely do you deliver the football? Or are you going, oh, crap, and you stand back there and take a sack?
Yeah.
It's all about execution. Preparation is great.
Yes.
But you cannot guarantee execution. And I think when you see people that say to those things, well, if you implement my system, you're going to get X result. That's a hard guarantee to make happen because you can't accurately predict the execution of those people that you're going to train.
No, you can't. But here's what I call that: take the money and run. That's that kind of training. They take the money and run, and then they're gone, and you don't hear back from them. But the other important part of the adaptation is, our execution is adaptation. Because if you are prepared, and you can learn how to think, then you can adapt when you see that guy coming at you. You might, you're better prepared. And that's why some of these guys that have been around a long time, it's hard to fool Drew Brees. It's hard to fool Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, those guys, because they've seen it. You can learn how to read the signs. And that's kind of what I try to get.
Well, they've learned execution, Mike.
Yes.
They've learned
exactly.
how to properly execute everything that, to your point, and that's a great point that you made. They know what's coming. And they said, okay, because of experience, I know how to execute. It doesn't mean that and here's what we're not saying. The best passer in the NFL is about a 70 or 75% passer.
Right.
There's 25% of those plays, even if they've seen it, maybe they're just a hair late getting the ball out.
Yes.
Maybe the wind is blowing. It kind of, brings a pass, or maybe – you can execute flawlessly, and that defensive lineman puts their hand up real quick and tips that pass, and it goes incomplete.
Yes.
So there's not flawless execution.
No, there's not. There's not.
Mike, when you decided to do that, and I'll stay here for just a minute before we pivot. When you decided to do that, what was the number one thing that you saw right away in your research that you said, I absolutely know that I can fix this, and if somebody will implement this one thing, and I don't want you to give away your secret sauce, but what was your V8 moment like? They're not executing on that.
Well, I mean, it's really simple. People always talk about, it's hard to find good talent, and in the industry, in our industry, it's not. We have so many people come. It's the hard part is keeping them, but if you can give that person access to something that's going to help them. And I think I told you about this. I had an employee, she called me one day crying early in my career, crying because a customer was yelling at her. And I walked her through how to fix it over the phone. The next day I came back and I gave her some more reinforcement, make sure she was good with it. And I realized, hey, you know what? She's never going to have another bad day because she didn't know how to handle this. And then I started showing her other things and showing other employees things. And so I never had the problems that everybody else had. But the moment came, while I was going through there thinking, wait a minute, again, if you build something that's not hit and run, if you do the work up front and you provide, people something that, is real and is true, you got to give people something to believe in, but you also have to give them what they need to be successful. And those are really two big things. But in this point, I saw, that companies spending billions of dollars every year, and they're not solving the problem. It's because, okay, let's roll it out. It's compliance. And okay, we're done with training. Read this, sign off on this. But when that person working overnight has a question, they don't have anybody to talk to. They don't have anybody to ask.
Well, you're talking about the difference between training and understanding.
Yeah.
It is so easy because in a training, a lot of times you're going to get people that are going to retain about 40% of what they got. And that's on a good day.
Yeah.
You're going to get that retention of about 40% and that's good deliverable training.
Right.
What happens to the 60% that you covered? What you want them to retain is the most important information.
Right.
And so, my thought around training is, how can people develop trainings where the retention goes up to about 75, 80%, and they're constantly not only retaining the important information, but flawlessly executing that important training again and again and again. And you look at a company like Chick-fil-A. I had a perfect example.
Yes.
I can't remember the last time I had a bad experience at Chick-fil-A.
Me either.
I can't remember, because to me, they're constantly training, retention, reinforcement. Training, retention, reinforcement. Rinse, repeat.
Yes.
And it's not hard. It's not hard at all. Mike, I want to pivot here for just a second. You mentioned early in the podcast, and I'm grateful that you mentioned that part of your story. Take me through the biggest obstacle that you've overcome and how you overcame it.
There are a lot of obstacles that I've gone through. I think, quite honestly, for me, what was really big is coming to understand that it's not personal, but it really is personal. And what I mean by that is, I might have a way to help you, Brian, but it just might not be the time for you.
Mm-hmm.
You may not want it. You may not need it. You may not understand that you need it. But when you do, hopefully you'll remember. So I had a situation with somebody around that MBA time. Actually, I just finished up, and I was talking to this guy. He's the CEO of the company, small company. We could have these conversations. And I say, John, man, I don't know if you realize what you have here. There's so many things I can do. I want to, help you guys.
Yeah.
And John says, you might be right. but then I always felt like a fool later, kind of, because I thought, well, afterwards, I wasn't there anymore, but things transpired, and I come to find out that wasn't the goal. That wasn't what they were trying to accomplish. And so, it just didn't fit. He didn't need that. And it wasn't him being mean or saying, Mike, that's dumb. It's like, he's like, well, you know what? Give me an opportunity. I'll listen. I can, that's the only thing I can promise you is that I'll take a listen. But, that was one of those things where, again, I thought, well, wow, you know what? Maybe it just doesn't fit. And I've experienced that. I'm sure you have too, where somebody brings you something and, you want to be cordial and professional and but it just may not be the right time for you. But when it is, I'm going to remember to come to you. So that was, for me, it was hard because I've had so many great ideas and so many different things that could have saved people, but until they were ready for it, it didn't matter how many hundreds of thousands of dollars I was going to save them. Mm-hmm. They just didn't get it, or they didn't want it, or they didn't understand it, or whatever the case was. So for me, that was the biggest thing to overcome. It's like, it's not personal.
Yeah.
But it really is, because each person is an individual. Each company's in a different situation.
Well, and learning that lesson, Mike, and a lot of people come to that lesson a little bit later than others, in sales, people, everybody buys differently. And what I've said for a while now is, I think salespeople sometimes forget what it's like to be the customer.
Yes.
I think salespeople forget, and they forget to say to themselves, if I were this guy, would the solution that I'm offering fit me?
Yes.
And I'm starting to think more like a consumer, because, again, when I see something that I need or want and the money's right and it's the right time for me. I saw something on American Pickers one time. I love American Pickers.
Me too.
Mike Wolf said this. He said the time to buy something is when you see it. And sometimes, but what's happened in our society, Mike, and I don't mean to go off on a tangent,
No.
but what's happened in our society is we'll go into debt for it. We'll say, oh, I got to have it.
Yes.
Instead of going, okay, well, yeah, it's the right item. Yeah, I want it. But I'm not willing to sacrifice my future for the present.
Right.
And I'm not willing. And a lot of times people just say, and we have to learn in our society the discipline of tolerance.
Yes.
And to say, yeah, I want it. I might need it. But if I can't do it within my means, I'm going to have to wait until that's what our grandparents did.
Yes.
Our grandparents didn't go into debt like we are as. And I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but what you said there was so important because you learned that from your customer. Mike, you got the right solution. It's just not the right time.
Yeah. Or the right circumstances, yeah.
Yeah, and kudos to you for learning that message.
Late.
Well, hey, better late than never.
Yeah, exactly.
Mike, as we finish up, man, you've been so great with your time. I have really enjoyed this conversation. I think there's going to be a ton of value that comes out of it for people.
I hope so.
I want you to leave this audience with your biggest piece of intentional encouragement.
I have several. But
go for it, man. This is your time. I'm just going to let you go here for a minute. Just okay. Go ahead.
So I'm going to give you a couple. First of all, don't want what's not yours unless you're willing to work for it. Too many people want things that, because somebody else has it. You know what? That person worked for it. So I think another piece that's really important is, and in order to get to where you want to be, to where you want to go, you have to be honest with where you're at right now. Everybody promises and oversells and does these things, but you know what? You have to be self-aware. You have to be doing that. The other thing too, and this is the big one, you just don't know when opportunity is going to knock. So, I hate to sound cliche, but get prepared, do the work. I never would have thought that I was going to, have this chance opportunity to meet you, talk to you, do whatever. I was, just doing my thing. And here I am, blessed today. So, same thing with the path I'm on. I did all the work up front. Out of the blue, I get a call. Hey, you know what? Come down to Texas. We have a job. Boom, I'm there. But it's because I was doing the work. So you've got to, do the work up front. And I think that's really the thing. Know yourself, and I think just be honest with yourself. I've never marched to the beat of a drum. I've kind of grooved to the rhythm of John Paul Jones's bass my whole life. I've always just been different, and that's okay. I'm okay, but I know the path I'm on, my purpose, and I just keep working on it. And it may take me 5 years, it may take me 10 years, but kind of like you mentioned the other day, I'll be doing this till the day I die. As far as your belief in the way you were acting and what, some of your core values, you're going to practice that all the time. Gratitude and just those different things. So that's what I have, focus on yourself.
And that's why I wanted you to
help yourself.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted you to go, because, I think what you just said was just powerful there, because I loved what you said about don't want what's not yours. Yeah. That's one of the 10 commandments in the Bible. Thou shalt not covet. And we've got such a society of covetousness. Like if my neighbor gets a new car, I get it. Today we call it keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
And so, I love that, Mike, because again, it's so easy on social media platforms to get caught up in, well, this guy has 800,000 followers. I got to pump out a lot of content, and I've got to constantly be. Listen, if your content is good, people will find you. I am a living testimony to that. People will find you if you're authentic, you're genuine, and you're consistent. You're GAC, you're genuine, you're authentic, you're consistent. People will find you. And I'm so glad our paths crossed.
Me too.
And I'm grateful. Tell folks where they can find you, Mike. The people want to connect with you. How can they do that?
It's really simple. If you want to send an email, you can email me at admin@cstorecenter.com. But, let's blow all the smoke screens out of the way. My phone number, 217-319-8933. No transparency, no BS. Text before you call, just because I might be teaching a class or doing something like that. But yeah, 217-319-8933. Anything convenience store, anything technology, anything, I'm here.
Yeah, you can also find him on LinkedIn at Mike Hernandez. And would highly recommend connecting with him. Mike, this has been a great pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed it.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through His Word. And until next time, remember, everyone, everywhere, at any time and any place can be an intentional